Welcome to Machine Learning Pioneers interview series presented by Microsoft. My name is Xiaopeng, and I lead Cloud and AI Go-to-Market in Microsoft Norway. In this four-episode series, we will meet four brilliant minds who are pioneering in the machine learning space in Norway and making massive impact in their respective industry. In this episode, we will meet Stephen Allwright from Elkjøp Nordic. So let's get started. Stephen, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Stephen Allwright. I am the data science team lead at Elkjøp Nordic. I've been working in data science for probably around 3 to 4 years now. And I'm very excited to be talking here today about ML and about using Microsoft as well.
Perfect. It's our pleasure to have you, of course. So you mentioned you're data science lead at Elkjøp. So can you say a few words about, what that means and maybe say a few words about your team and your day-to-day work?
Yeah. So in Elkjøp Nordic, we have a team that sits within a wider insights and analytics department. And so I lead a team of 3 data scientists. And our job is mainly to work with the rest of the organization in solving business issues with data science. So my day-to-day looks a lot in the terms of kind of split 50-50. So half of the day tends to be spent on project and team admin, and then the other 50% tends to be spent on working with projects. So in terms of projects and team admin, that means speaking with end users, finding out what kinds of projects are needed to be worked on, and also, giving updates on projects that we're currently working on and, solving other issues with existing projects as well. And then the other 50% tends to be a project that I am working on myself or working on with another team member. But that's what I really like about my role, is that it is split between working and coding on projects myself, and also speaking with end users and trying to figure out ways that we can use data science to solve real business problems in Elkjøp.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because I know, for some folks, when they step into a team lead or manager position, they stop to be hands-on. But sounds like you managed to do both in your current role. So that's really a plus, I would say.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the reason why I was so excited about taking the role, was that split and still being able to work on things. Because we are still only 4 data scientists in this team. And so Elkjøp Nordic is a really large organization. And so we kind of really need as many people working on these projects as possible. So it doesn't really, it's not really feasible for us to have someone who is fully working on kind of admin and team and project admin all the time. And so I was really excited to take that on, because I do, whilst I enjoy the people aspect, I do still want to be able to contribute and work on projects myself as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. So let's double click a little bit on your personal experience. So when did you start working with machine learning? How did your journey begin?
Yeah, so I started working with machine learning in 2017. And it mainly started by just realizing that I wanted to get into data science. I spoke to my brother-in-law who worked in data science and realized that that was the career that I wanted to go down. And so I started taking online courses on, all the different course platforms like Udemy and Coursera, etc., and started to work on personal projects as well that I would then post onto GitHub. And then from there, I started to apply for jobs in data science, and then ended up working as a data science consultant at Sopra Steria. And then after working there for almost 2 years, then I moved to Elkjøp now, where I work as a team lead there. But it was mainly, the reason why I got into it was because it seemed to be a very good fit for my skills. Because I have a background, my degree is in mathematics, and I'd worked in finance for a couple of years in England. And so I liked the numbers and the coding aspect and the technical aspect, but I also really enjoyed the people aspect as well, because data science, which is often forgotten, is solving problems for people, and so that's what I really enjoyed, is using the technical skills to help people with their problems and, find out what their issue is and discuss with them and work with them to find a solution that makes their day on their workload easier.
Absolutely. I think especially when you are working in a consumer-facing business where your work can have direct impact on the customer experience of your customers. So I think that's definitely something that can put joy in your heart, I think, by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you actually had a pivot, before going into data science. You actually worked, I think, 1 year also as a kindergarten teacher, right? So that's quite an unique experience. Can you say, what's the main difference and similarities between, working as a kindergarten teacher and working as a data scientist?
Yeah, I think surprisingly there are some similarities. For me, I think the similarities is in relation to being able to communicate effectively with people. One of the key things in data science is being able to communicate effectively to people who aren't data scientists. People who don't understand what machine learning is, they don't understand how it works, but you still need to be able to communicate effectively with them. And so I think there's parallels there in when I worked in the kindergarten, because in the kindergarten, there's, you've got lots of kids and therefore lots of parents that you also need to communicate with. And sometimes there can be a lot going on at a given time. And so being able to kind of stay cool under pressure and communicate effectively with people, maybe about a given issue or something that happened during the day, was definitely something that I got better at when I was at the kindergarten. And I think that I use that as well in my day-to-day job now. I think the differences are that I found the kindergarten to be more stressful in a kind of direct way than working as a data scientist. When you've got like 9 children that are like crying at the same time, that's a very different type of stress than working on data science and machine learning projects. And so I like to think that maybe I'm quite good at handling pressure and stress now because of that. But I would say that, yeah, being able to communicate with people and, have difficult conversations with people. And that was definitely a similarity between the two.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the communicative part of data science, which is very interesting because it's actually not discussed so much. I think when we talk about data science, there has been a strong focus on, the technology part of it, building the best model ever and talking about performance. And nowadays we also talk about, building ethical, responsible models. But, the last part of completing a solution is really to communicate insights and really, actions back to the business. I think that part should really be talked even more. I think the way you describe it really makes me resonate because I believe, oftentimes we need to communicate complicated results back to, business folks who do not necessarily understand, data science to the level that you do. So how to simplify, the results and how to report back in a meaningful way. That's actually very similar to when you communicate, complicated topics to the kids in the kindergarten, right? Because you will have to simplify, you will have to make it visual, right?
Yeah. And that's what I really enjoy about the job is working in like cross-functional teams with people who have different skills. I really enjoy being able to work in those teams, and I think that as you were saying, I think we as data scientists often forget that is a thing. Often people work in teams of data scientists creating models and forgetting that those models have to be used by people who don't know all of the technicalities of it. And you have to be able to end up with a solution that is understandable to people. And you need to be able to explain how it works to people in a way that doesn't involve lots of technical knowledge. And that's, I think, probably the biggest challenge for us at Elkjøp Nordic is being able to communicate and find projects to work on across the organization, because we work across the Nordics. So it's 4 countries. And so there's a huge amount of people that work in Elkjøp Nordic, and being able to gather the correct people from across the organization and communicate effectively with all of them, from marketing, finance, people work in stores, and be able to kind of gather them and explain to them like how a given project would work and how it will affect their day-to-day work. And I think is that something that we often forget in data science. So that is crucial, because if you can create the best model in the world, but if no one understands it and if no one is really interested, then it's not going to be used, and then you've wasted a lot of time making it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really good insights. So I'm just thinking, if you are going to give some advice to an aspiring, data scientist, someone who is trying to be a data scientist, what would be your top advice? Obviously, they might want to try out 1 year or 2 in kindergarten before becoming a data scientist. But what else?
I think this is quite common, but I always suggest to work on personal projects and post those projects on GitHub and make them available and show them to potential employers. Because people, when they're hiring, they want to know what you can do. And if you if you don't have experience prior to working in a data science role before, then you need to be able to show that you're able to create an end product. So I would always say that make sure that you have a kind of a range of products on GitHub that show the different types of skills that you have. And then I would also say that there's lots of different courses available to getting into data science. And that's great because there's lots of content available. But I would say that you don't need to spend an enormous amount of money on courses to gain the skills that you need. So I would also say that there's lots of different ways to learn the skills. But at the end of the day, people want to be able to see that you can do the work. And so if you can show through projects that you've done that you're able to create projects and create models, regardless of how much money you spent getting there, it doesn't really matter for the employer at the end of the day.
So would you say that if you are to hire a data scientist, you would actually place more weight on the portfolio instead of the certifications?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I'm more interested in seeing what they can do rather than where they've learned their skills from.
Yeah, understood. So we have touched upon a little bit around the meaning of data science, right? Because I think for you, let's say machine learning, you think it's not a tool itself. It's not the end goal, so to speak. It's something that we use to solve business problem. So can you elaborate a bit more on that one?
Yeah, this is something I think, and again, something that we maybe forget in the data science world, is that machine learning is a tool that we use as data scientists to come to an end goal. My job and the job of most data scientists is to create solutions that solve business problems. And we can do that by creating a dashboard, by creating a report, by just doing some simple analysis on a data set, or we can use machine learning to predict for something or to group some group of customers or to find patterns in data. But that is not the only thing that we do. And I think often what happens is that as data scientists, we enjoy working with machine learning so much because it's such an interesting technology, and it has it can solve so many issues that we then end up looking like people walking around with a hammer trying to find a nail, rather than trying to look at the business problem and figure out how best to solve it. Whereas instead, people, including myself, are very tempted to just throw machine learning at everything and only want to work with that. And so that's why I say that ML is a tool that we use rather than the actual job that we do. So essentially show that as data scientists, there's lots of ways that you can solve a problem, ML being one of them.
I think this is actually one of the areas we can take some inspirations from designers, because I have some experience working with designers in the past. And from a design thinking point of view, you always start by defining the problem. And then you try to figure out, what are the needs, what are the wants behind the problem. And then you try to formulate the solution. And then you talk about technology, right? So I think essentially when we design a machine learning experiment or a machine learning solution, we also need to start from that end, right?
Yeah. And that's very interesting you bring that up, because often, and I'm tempted to do this as well. I see or read something online about a project that someone has created and think, oh, that'd be great to do at work at AnyShop. Instead, actually, what we should be doing is finding business problems that cause the business a lot of pain or cost the business a lot of money, and see, okay, is this a problem that we can solve in the data science team? And then if it is, then okay, we try and find out what we can do to help solve that problem, instead of the temptation, which is, oh my life, I've seen this amazing product recommender model online that I would love to work on. Let me try and persuade the e-commerce team to let me implement this on the e-commerce platform. It may not, it may be super cool to work on, but if it doesn't solve a business problem or doesn't, save or generate more money for the business, then it's not really, helpful. Whereas there's a million other things that we could be working on that are, genuinely really helpful for the business.
Yeah. I think, it's about the validation, because one idea might come from the business side or might come from technical side. Like you said, you might run into some new technology, but then you need to validate that with the business stakeholder on, if there's a case for that, if there's a value in implementing that, right? So I would say, there's definitely a balance to maintain in that angle. So I'm thinking, you work for a large multinational organization that's actually operating across Nordics. And what is the biggest challenge for you, practicing machine learning in such an organization? That sounds like a leading question, but not really. So please, share your perspectives.
Yeah, there are challenges. I think we're over 10,000 employees across the Nordics. So there's a lot of people that work in the organization. And I think the biggest challenge is not a technical one. Our challenge is not necessarily related to data or to systems, but more often than not, it's related to finding out where the pain points are and finding out who the stakeholders are for a given project, and being able to gather the correct people and decide together on what projects would bring the most value. That's it. In my experience, that's the biggest pain point. And that's just a result of the kind of the size of the organization, and being able to find genuine pain points for the business can be very difficult, because everything is so interconnected. So if you have a problem with somewhere you think that a project might solve an issue on the e-commerce platform, that may not necessarily originate from the e-commerce team. It may originate from somewhere else in the business. And so then trying to find out, okay, if we create this project to solve this, how do we integrate with this platform? Who do we need to speak to? Who do we need to have as our stakeholders on the project? That's probably the biggest pain point. But that's also part of the what I like about the job as well, is finding out, who needs to be involved, getting people on board, making sure that people understand how projects might solve an issue, and kind of gathering all these people from different from different departments with different skills. It's an issue, but it's part of the reason why I like the role as well.
So I mean, that sounds like something really exciting, but challenging at the same time. So I mean, working with the stakeholders from the business side requires a lot of efforts and attention, right? So what would you say is your biggest learning so far when it comes to interacting, aligning, or managing the business stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's probably gathering people at the beginning. I think my biggest learning is early on when I started at Eldership, I worked on a project and I got people involved at the end after I'd completed it. And then you end up essentially doubling the length of the project, because you have to explain everything to everyone, and you have to, get people on board to want to use it and want to integrate it. And really doing that at the end is not the best time to do it whatsoever. And really it should be, you figure out the business problem, like you were saying at the beginning, you gather all the people that are related to that problem, and then you create a solution together as a group. And then you go along the journey of creating it together. And so that's my biggest learning is, and I'm working on a big project at the moment where, right from the beginning, we've gathered everyone together from all the different departments that are going to be affected by this project. And, we're going to work out the solution together. and then we're going to go along the whole process together as a group. And that means that when you're finished with the technical aspect of developing it, then when it comes to testing, people are already there. You know, they already know what it is, they know what it involves, and they go, yeah, great, that's fine, I'll test it now. Rather than, oh, okay, maybe I have some time in like a month or 2 months. You probably should have told me earlier on. You know, now we're doing this together and we're kind of creating this as a team. So that's the biggest learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, because obviously, you know, for me, just based on my reflection, there are two benefits. I mean, one thing is to being inclusive, you know, to different part of the organization, right? Involving them early on so that you can have buy-in from them when you try to implement the solution back to the operations, to the business. Another thing is obviously, you know, data science is a team sport, right? So we should not underestimate the importance of domain knowledge. The knowledge of people who are actually, you know, working on the business side or interacting with the customer on a daily basis. So for sure, I really can resonate to the point you made. So let's, you know, talk a little bit about technology. So obviously, you know, in the past years, a lot of machine learning projects have been moved, you know, from a single laptop to the cloud. So what do you see as the main benefits of running machine learning projects on the cloud? And if you can, maybe also share some experience, you know, working with machine learning on Azure.
Yeah, I think for us moving to Azure Machine Learning and doing everything in the cloud, I think it's two things. The first thing is the Azure Machine Platform itself helps us to track all of our models and all of our development to a very low level, which really helps in terms of finding either issues or understanding the development of a project. And what I mean by that is when you're running experiments, developing a model, in Azure Machine Learning, you're able to see the data set that was used to create that model, the metrics from that model, and be able to track that over time. And that's really helpful because often what happens is when you start working on a project, if you do it locally on your laptop, you may create a baseline model, and then you may, you know, write down the results from that baseline, and you get so caught up in creating and, you know, improving the model that then you forget, okay, the baseline for this project was X. Oh, but then I think I changed something to the data set, or I think I changed something else as well. So I'm not sure if the improvement in accuracy is because of the data set, or is it because of something I changed in the model? And so then, you know, you end up really far down the line and you forget actually if it's better now than it was before. And so Azure Machine Learning helps a lot with that because we're able to track that over time. So that's the benefit just purely of the platform. But in terms of working in the cloud specifically, I think we have a lot of quite large models because of the large data sets that we work with. And just being able to sit on my laptop and be able to train models and run experiments on really large compute is super beneficial. And, you know, just to be able to spin up a larger compute if I need it, and just be super flexible in that regard is a real big benefit for us. Another, I think the third kind of key benefit is just the integration with other Azure products like Azure DevOps, and being able to hold our code in repos in Azure DevOps and, you know, run pipelines when we push up new code into a master branch for a project, for example, which then runs a pipeline in Azure Machine Learning, for example, has been really helpful. And as you say, data science is a team sport, and we obviously are a team of data scientists. And so to be able to have infrastructure that we use as a team together is really helpful because it reduces the amount of code that we just, you know, boilerplate code that we just copy all the time. And it means that starting new projects is very easy because everything is, you know, contained within Azure DevOps and everyone knows how to, you know, start new projects. And so that's also a benefit as well, working across the team and making the creation of new projects easier to do and more productive for us.
Well, that's quite a lot of different benefits, but thanks for sharing. I think, you know, obviously it's no surprise to me, but I think it's definitely enlightening for many folks who will be watching this episode. So again, thanks for sharing those. So, this episode, I mean, this interview series is called Machine Learning Pioneers. So obviously, we want to highlight folks who are really pioneering in this space of machine learning within Norway. But what does it mean to you to be a machine learning pioneer?
I think for me, as someone who came into data science from a kind of a non-standard background, a non-standard route, I think for me, it's about sharing experience with people and helping people with non-standard backgrounds to get into data science and machine learning. That for me is what it kind of means if I was to be called an ML pioneer, is to be able to share that experience. But from a technical point of view, I think it's related to, or when I think about people who pioneer in the industry, then it's about not copying stuff which you've just read online. And it's about using ideas and implementing them, taking ideas from different fields of interest and applying them to data science, and not just implementing things that you've read online. And by that, I think that we really push data science and machine learning forward. A good example of that is what you were saying earlier about how that often the process of working in data science can be you can use similar processes in design to how you create data science models. And I think that by taking ideas from different fields, then we as people in the ML community can then push forward, the value of machine learning, and then the reach of machine learning in businesses. So that's what I think when I think of ML pioneers.
That's really insightful. And just for me myself, I do have some reflections associated with the fact that you are featured in this activity, because I mean we do know each other before having this conversation. And the reason why I feel so inspired about your story is because it made it it basically opens the possibility for many other folks who do not come from a traditional background that's associated with data science. I mean, some folks might think, you need to have a PhD in physics in order to be a data scientist. I mean, it has been the case, for a while, and we do, see many data scientists with that type of background, but that's not, a necessity, right? So for somebody with a slightly different, background coming from finance or working with kindergarten, you have different possibilities. So I think, that possibility is definitely enlightening for a lot of folks. Another thing, like you said, being extremely interdisciplinary when you work with machine learning and taking into account and taking into use different background. I think that's another part of making data science and machine learning more inclusive in the working environment. So that's why it's also so inspiring for me as well.
Yeah, I think it's also related to what I was saying earlier about creating personal projects and posting them on GitHub. Because if we're hiring for a data science role in Elkjøp, then I'm much more interested in seeing what they can do. And I think that opens the doors for so many people from different backgrounds. Because it doesn't matter if you have a degree in languages, if you are able and have learned to work in data science and you know how to write Python and SQL, then if you're able to do the projects, then I don't really mind what degree you have or what previous job you've had. And I think that's part of the beauty of working in ML. And that's what I try to do is, share my experience with other people to make sure that other people can join ML. And also then we, make sure that we're more inclusive as a industry or as a kind of field of interest.
Makes a lot of sense. And thank you again, Stephen, for having this conversation for me today. Inspiring as always. And please continue being out there, interacting with the community and sharing your stories. Because I think this would really inspire a lot of new people, coming into the machine learning space from different, more diverse backgrounds than we have seen so far. All right. So with that, I want to wrap up this interview. And thank you again for being part of this conversation.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.